omnis terra adoret.
Psalm 3. Quid multiplicati? Domine, quid multiplicati sunt qui tribulant me? Multe insurgunt adversum me, multe dicunt animae meae. Non est salus ipsi in Deo eus. Tu autem, Domine, susceptor meus es, gloria mea, et exultans caput meum. Voce mea ad Dominum clamavi, et exaudivit me de monte sancto suo. Ego dormivi, et suppuratus sum, et exorexi, quia Dominus suscepit me. Non timebo milia populis circumdantis me. Exerge, Domine, salvum me fac, Deus meus. Quoniam tu percussisti omnes adversantes mihi sine causa, dentes peccatorum contrivisti. Domini est salus, et super populum tuum benedictio tua. Psalm 3 in English. This is a psalm of David when he fled from the face of his son Absalom. Why, O Lord, are they multiplied that afflict me? Many are they who rise up against me. Many say to my soul, there is no salvation for him in his God. But thou, O Lord, art my protector, my glory, and the lifter up of my head. I have cried to the Lord with my voice, and he hath heard me from his holy hill. I have slept and taken my rest, and I have risen up, because the Lord hath protected me. I will not fear thousands of the people surrounding me. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. For thou hast struck all them who are my adversaries without cause. Thou hast broken the teeth of sinners. Salvation is of the Lord, and thy blessing is upon thy people. The vocabulary for Psalm 3. The first word is Domine, which is Lord, Master, or Ruler. That's second declension vocative case for addressing. So just the Lord would be Dominus. Domine is vocative when you're speaking to him, O Lord. So Domine, quid multiplicati sunt qui tribulant me? Why, O Lord, are they multiplied that afflict me? The second word is anime, soul, air, breath of life. This is first declension dative case, meaning to. So, multe dicunt anime meae. Many say to my soul. Many say to my soul. It's directed towards the soul. Caput means head, and that's undeclined. Et exultans caput meum, the lifter up of my head. Monte, that means mountain or hill, from mons, montis. And that's third declension noun in the ablative case, meaning from, monte, from the mountain or from the hill. Exaudivit me de monte sancto suo, he hath heard me from his holy hill. Dormivi, I have slept. That's first person, singular, perfect, from dormio, I sleep. So when it's something that has already been done, that's perfect. I have slept. Ego dormivi et suppuratus sum. I have slept and taken my rest. And finally, populum. This is from the word populus, meaning people or nation. It's second declension noun in the accusative case with the preposition super, which makes it upon thy people. Super populum tuum benedictio tua. Thy blessing is upon thy people. So Domine means O Lord, and it's from the word Dominus, which means Lord, Master, or Ruler. In the Bible, when you see the word Dominus, it almost always refers to God, Lord as God, a title for God. Remember, the ancient Hebrews did not like to say the name of God or even write the name of God. So whenever that was written in the text, the scribes would tend to replace it with the word Lord instead. From this we get English words like dominate or dominion, which means sovereignty or control. And Mark 12 has this to say about the Lord. And one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, this is to Jesus, which is the first commandment of all? And Jesus answered him, the first of all commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. This is a restatement of one of the most important parts of the Old Covenant, which the Hebrews called the Shema, the great profession of faith. And it's something that is very unique to the Israelite people because, unlike the other nations around them, their God is one Lord. They don't worship a multiplicity of gods. They don't have a whole pantheon of lords. They have one God, and he is the Lord of all creation. And so, therefore, he alone is worthy of their full devotion, all of their heart, all of their soul, all their strength. That is to be directed to the Lord, because he is the master and ruler of all things. And therefore, we as his creatures owe him all things. The next word is anima, or soul. And this means as well breath, air, or breath of life. The soul is the breath of life. It's what gives something life. The difference between a living body and a dead body is the presence of the soul, that breath of life. So we get from this the word animate, which is to bring to life, literally to ensoul something. Someone who's animated has a great deal of life in them. But even if you take pictures and you animate them, as in a cartoon, it's like bringing those pictures to life. So even the word animal comes from this. An animal just means something that has the breath of life, a living thing. So in philosophy, for example, ancient philosophy, they would speak of man and beasts and God all as animals, meaning they have this living soul. They have this life essence. And a great deal of ancient philosophy was focused on what the nature of the soul actually was. It was always associated with breath, but its particular nature was of great interest to a lot of philosophers. So Plotinus, one of the Platonic philosophers, said this about the soul. We may treat of the soul as in the body, whether it be set above it or actually within it, since the association of the two constitutes the one thing called the living organism, the animate. Now from this relation, from the soul using the body as an instrument, it does not follow that the soul must share the body's experiences. A man does not himself feel all the experiences of the tools with which he is working. He understood the body and soul together form the animate organism. So there's a sense in which the animate organism is not just the body or the soul, but they didn't know if the soul was actually inside the physical body. Some philosophers believed it was actually above it, like over their head. There was a location for it of sorts, but the soul and the body go together to create the animate organism. But the Platonists believed that the body was almost more like a vessel for the soul. And so the soul was eternal and continued on even after the body was left behind. And this is very similar to the Christian understanding. In the Christian understanding, the body and the soul all are more essentially joined. We think of the soul as the form of the body. In other words, the body is like a physical manifestation of the soul of sorts. But the soul, the person, can continue to exist. The breath of life continues even when it is no longer present in the body. So there is a distinction between the two, and there is some difficulty in sorting out exactly how they work together. And a soul continuing to exist outside of the body, we might call that ghosts. In fact, one of those even shows up in Scripture in the Old Testament when Saul goes to a witch, the witch of Endor, and bids her to summon Samuel back from the dead to ask his counsel. And the witch actually does this. She calls up the soul, the spirit of Samuel from the underworld, and he comes and pronounces judgment on Saul. The next word is undeclined. It is caput, which means head. And from this we get all manner of words that pertain to the head of something or the top of something. So words like capital, that would be the top of a pillar or the head city in a nation or state. You have captain, who is the head of other men. You have decapitate, which is to remove somebody's head. So caput. So there are many words that incorporate caput as head. And Colossians 1:18 says that he, Christ, is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence. So because he is the head, he is preeminent. He is at the top. And the picture here is an engraving of the incident with St. Thomas Aquinas and the brazen head, which is a very interesting story which comes down to us from the Middle Ages. According to legends, several wise scholars and naturalists of the medieval age created mechanical speaking heads out of brass or bronze. These were called brazen heads. Pope Sylvester, Friar Roger Bacon, and St. Albert the Great were all reputed to have accomplished this feat of ingenuity in natural science. But St. Albert's was perhaps the most interesting story, since the incessant and creepy talking of the brazen head drove young St. Thomas Aquinas to smash his master's creation. So according to the story, St. Thomas was passing by St. Albert the Great's cell in the monastery, and he heard this head talking with nobody in there, and it creeped him out so much that he took a hammer in there and he smashed the head that St. Albert had put all this work into creating. Next we have mons for mountain, or in our text it was monte, the ablative ending, from the mountain or from the hill. Mountains are very important in Scripture. They show up all the time. From the beginning at creation, which was set in the Garden of Eden, which had 4 rivers flowing out from it in different directions, which means they were flowing downhill. The mountain where man was created to be with God initially. And then all throughout you have Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, Mount Zion. You have the mountain that Abraham climbed to sacrifice Isaac. You have the mountain of the Transfiguration. You have the mountain of the skull where Christ was crucified. You have the mountain of prophecy in the book of Daniel. Mountain shows up constantly because the mountain represents a place where man meets God. And that's why Jesus was particularly fond of mountains, and he was often heading up mountains, as we see in Matthew 14. When he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray, and when the evening was come, he was there alone. So Jesus was known to spend the night alone on mountains. Mountains represent the meeting of God with man. That's why there's such thing as holy mountains. That's why temples are built on the mountains. That's why laws are received on the mountain. These are important places. And from this Latin word we get the phrase ultramontane, which means literally beyond the mountains. And that's a phrase which describes somebody who advocates for supreme papal authority in matters of faith and discipline. Or simply if somebody is referring to somebody or something else on the other side of the Alps. The ultramontane lake, that would be a lake on the other side of the Alps from where the speaker is talking. Our next word is a verb, dormivi, I have slept. That's the first person singular perfect from the verb dormio, meaning I sleep. So remember, perfect means it's something that has already been done. I have slept. And from this Latin word, we get the English word dormant, which, when we're speaking of an animal, means that an animal that is having its normal physical function suspended or slowed down for a period of time, in or as if it's in a deep sleep. So sometimes insects, when they're changing their form, they will go dormant, or things will be dormant for a long time after they hatch. And we can also speak of a volcano being dormant. That just means it's inactive. It's been inactive for a long time and might be inactive for the foreseeable future. So it's like the volcano is asleep. And sleep is a very interesting thing. St. Basil the Great says this of it: "Let not half thy life be useless through the senselessness of slumber. Divide the time of night between sleep and prayer. Nay, let thy slumbers be themselves experiences in piety, for it is only natural that our sleeping dreams should be for the most part echoes of the anxieties of the day. As have been our conduct and pursuits, so will inevitably be our dreams. Thus wilt thou pray without ceasing, if thought prayest not only in words, but unitest thyself to God through all the course of life, and so thy life be made one ceaseless and uninterrupted prayer. He is presenting here the monastic ideal of a life of prayer, and not even to allow sleep to get in the way of that. Monks will often rise in the middle of the night to pray, so they won't allow themselves to even go more than a few hours without actively praying. And St. Basil is encouraging people to be so diligent at prayer that even in your dreams you're continuing to hold converse with God and to unite yourself to God in piety, as St. Joseph did when he received direction from God in his dreams. And our last word is populus, which means people or nation. And from this we get our English word popular, meaning liked, admired, or enjoyed by many people, or by a particular person or group, and also intended for or suited to the taste, understanding, or means of the general public, rather than specialists or intellectuals. So popular entertainment would be entertainment that's aimed at the most people, not just a particular little section of unusual people who listen to German opera, for example. That's not popular entertainment because it does not appeal to the majority of people. And if you ever visit Rome, you will see inscriptions on ancient monuments and modern things of SPQR. And that was a Roman motto which represented civic unity. It meant, SPQR meant Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome. And of these people of the earth, Apocalypse says this: After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations, and kindreds, and people, and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, and palms in their hands. So this is interesting because it indicates that when the nations were divided up at the Tower of Babel by language, and you have all these different peoples and nations, these are going to endure all the way to the end of time. There will still be different languages and nations and peoples at the end of time. And in our grammar lesson, we're continuing to look at the noun. St. Isidore in his etymology says this concerning the noun. The noun, nomen, is so called as if it were denoter, notamen, because by its designation it makes things known. Latin noscere, or pluperfect notus, to us. Indeed, unless you know its name, nomen, the knowledge of a thing perishes. So he's connecting here the etymology of name, nomen, to noun. It's actually the same word. Proper nouns, proprium nomen, are so called because they are specific. They signify one single person only. Appellative nouns, or common nouns, are so called because they are common and make reference to many things, as in appellare, to name. So the correct word for common nouns is appellative nouns, but we just break these down into proper nouns and common nouns. Remember, a proper noun is any kind of specific name, something that you would capitalize, like the name of a city or the name of a movie or a person's name. These are proper nouns because they refer to one specific thing. Common nouns refer just to categories of nouns, to whole groups of nouns, not specific ones. So like cities or movies or books or people. Those types of words are all common nouns because I'm not singling out any particular one by name. He continues, cases, or casus in Latin, are so called from having an ending, from cadere, pluperfect casus. Through the cases, inflected nouns are varied and have their endings. So Isidore's attaching the etymology of our word cases, by which we call these different endings on the nouns, from the Latin word which means having an ending. And Lilly's grammar says this: the number of nouns. Nouns in Latin have two numbers, the singular and the plural. The singular speaks of but one, as pater, a father. The plural speaks of more than one, as patres, fathers. Okay, so Latin has singular and plural, just like English does. In plural, in English, we usually just add an S to make something plural. If I have a book and I add an S to it, now I have books. That's more than one. Latin does the same thing, but there are a little bit different endings depending on which declension it is. So these endings, Lily's going to list them here in the cases of nouns. Nouns have 6 cases, casus or fallings, in each number. The nominative, the genitive, the dative, the accusative, the vocative, and the ablative. Right? We've already talked about a few of these. To decline a noun is to make it pass through these cases or fallings, and the showing of them is called a declension. So a noun in the nominative case, or casus rectus, was considered by ancient grammarians as a line perpendicular, and in the other ones, casus obliqui, as gradually declining or falling from the perpendicular. So this is his explanation for why we call it declining. We're starting at the nominative, also from the word nomen, for name, and then we're falling away from that depending on the usage all the way down to ablative. So we will get more into that in our future lessons. For now, just memorize the 6 case names: nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, vocative, and ablative. And you can use a mnemonic aid to help you remember this. Break it down by the first letters, N, G, D, A, V, A, and you can come up with your own, or use something like Napoleon gulps drinks alone very awkwardly. You can imagine Napoleon sitting by himself with a big gulp, and he's guzzling it by himself, and he's like spilling it everywhere, or something like that, to help you remember that mnemonic. Napoleon gulps drinks alone very awkwardly. Or you can make up your own to remember these: nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, vocative, and ablative.